Welcome back to Recipe Tales. Today we're going to do the olive red rice gluten-free bread. Doing gluten-free bread sometimes can be very challenging because of the flour mix. So I today have tried with the red rice flour. So you can mill your red rice in the Thermomix. Mill about say 2 minutes 10 seconds to get a very fine flour. I have also used sorghum flour, which is also known as jawar flour in Hindi. It's known as jawar. So sorghum flour, I have used just a little bit of it, about 110 is equal balance. And of course the tapioca flour is to bind these two flours much more, because that's the starch. And to reduce the starch content, like most of the mixes that we have in the gluten-free flours has a lot more starches. So I've reduced the starches by adding psyllium husk. And in Hindi this is called isabgol, which is very easily available at the Indian grocery shop. So I buy this bulk, and then I mill it to a powder, which is easy to add into the various mix of flours. And another part of if you're using gluten-free flour is to use flaxseed. Again, I have milled it, but if you're milling your rice, then mill it along with your rice, the psyllium husk and the flaxseed. So then you have a proper mix of it, and it's much more faster for you to make your bread. So shall we start now? Ingredients for olive red rice gluten-free bread: 110 grams milled rice flour, 20 grams of flaxseed, 110 grams sorghum flour, 90 grams tapioca flour, 1 teaspoon of any herbs that you prefer. In this case I have used basil, 1.5 teaspoon of salt, 410 grams of water, 25 grams of gula melaka pieces or palm sugar, 8 grams of active dry yeast, 15 grams psyllium husk powder, 30 grams of peated olives, and 10 grams of apple cider vinegar. Today we're going to do olive red rice gluten-free bread, and I'm using my red rice that I've already grinded. Let me show you how we're going to mix all this flours together in a very short time. So I'm just going to open my lid out here, and I'm going to put the gluten-free red rice flour. But if you want to mill it again, you can mill it if you have your ground fresh red rice that you have in your home. You can mill it, which I've already written in the recipe. This is sorghum. Again, I'm putting it in, mixing it all up together. And the next we are going to put is the tapioca flour, which is of course 90 grams and is very fine. This is going to bind the bread together. And of course we are going to add in our flaxseed, which is again another good binder, but it's also good for our health. So this is flaxseed meal. There's a shortcut of how to do everything together, milling it if you are just having your rice flour at home, and you need to mill everything together. You can do it. So let's just go. I'm going to pull out my turbo, and the arms gets closed, and I'm going to mill it 2 seconds. So it's a milling function. At the same time it also mixes for us. So if you want to sieve your flour, it can be done in this manner. So we can just go, okay, that's it, we are done. And I'm going to go back to open the arms, and here we have all the 3 flours that has been mixed very well. So once the flour is mixed very well, then the binding of all the other ingredients is much more easier. Remember, this is a gluten-free flour, I clean my jar and we're going to add in some water to activate our yeast. Before activating, I'm going to take my psyllium husk that's been powdered. I'm going to add in some water to it, about 50 grams of water approximately, and the balance will go into making our activation of the yeast. So I'm just going to add some water to this, about 50 grams, and we're going to mix this so that it will become a nice gel. And the balance I'm going to add in here. And in this, I'm going to add my gula melaka. This is palm sugar. If you don't have palm sugar, you can always use maple syrup or agave syrup or anything that you have. I like the flavor of palm sugar because that kicks away the fragrance of the sorghum. It cuts off the fragrance of the sorghum, which brings about a better balance in the bread. So I'm going to add that first in, the palm sugar. And then we are going to weigh about 8 grams. I'm going to pull out my scale and I'm going to put about 8 grams of yeast. So 8 grams of yeast has already been added, and we are going to activate it at 2 minutes 30 seconds. So we're going to activate that and we're going to go to spoon mode and the arms gets closed. Do you know sometimes why our bread doesn't come out well? Sometimes it's because we have not activated the yeast properly. Now Thermomix gives us that opportunity of getting exactly at 37 degrees. So in whichever country you are, make sure that your yeast is well activated. So in a very cold country, you may need 40 degrees rather than 37 degrees. I'm in a tropical country, so 37 is just perfect to activate the yeast. Let it froth up a little bit before we put in our gluten-free bread. Okay, our flour, the mix that I have done over here. In the meantime, this has become a nice lovely textured gel, as you can see. We're going to add that once it is our yeast has been activated. So this is what binds the gluten-free bread. We don't have any gluten in the flours because it's just rice flour and tapioca flour and sorghum flour, which has got no gluten. So gluten is the one that helps to bind and also brings about the pockets, crumbs, larger crumbs in the bread. So in the gluten-free bread, normally you don't get that large crumbs, but we can get lighter bread, and we can slice it very thinly if you want to by using just the gluten-free, the psyllium husk and the flaxseed meal. That's my take of how I make my own breads. Right, so I have I've greased my pan, 8-inch by 4.5-inch pan, and you can put a parchment paper in the center so that it's easy to pull out the bread, because there's two stages of baking this bread because it's gluten-free in a way, and it is red rice flour that we're using, so it's going to be taking 2 stages of baking. Therefore I put a parchment paper in it. Right, so our yeast has been activated very well. As you can see, the bubbles that has formed like that. Okay, so this is a good way of checking and making sure that it's well done. And the next stage we're going to do is we're going to put in our psyllium husk gel that we have done, soaked it in the water, and then we're going to add in our gluten-free flour mix in it. So we're going to add that in. And we're going to add in our salt. That is about 1.5 teaspoon of salt that we need to have. That is the measurement that I have done here for this. And of course, if you want to, we can always add herbs to it, like rosemary, basil, or oregano. This will help in giving much more better flavor, and because I'm going to add olives, I'm going to add some herbs to it. So we can add herbs in our gluten-free flour. As you know that I've mentioned that we're going to add our pitted olives in it. So I prefer to have a little bit of flavor to it, and I'm going to add a little bit of basil. So you can add about, say, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of basil if you want to. And then we are going to mix it, all of it together. And here we go. We're going to knead it actually, so we're going to bring out our kneading function over here, and we can do a kneading of 30 seconds first, and we press that, and there we go. Wow, that was fast, wasn't it? No mess at all. Look at that. Our dough is well developed. It's a very soft dough, but I'm going to bind it now again. But I didn't want to add inside my olives because I don't want it to crush. So I'm going to take it out on my pastry mat. I'm going to bind it along with it. So here we go. We're going to turn this up, and our dough is out. So the less of it, we're going to take it, scrape it out, and then we're going to add this on top of it, and I'm going to show you how we bind it. Right, so I'm going to dust a little bit of my red rice flour on my hand, and I'm just going to mix this all together. There we go. So we're going to mix the olives to it. You can add, yeah, so just do a rough kind of mix together. Just if it's too wet, you can always use your hand again and then just go around, form into a nice dough. So I'm going to just get it done so that all the olives are around it and not in one place. So here we go. So I'm just going to dust it again and form it into a nice round kind of thing, and then we're going to just let it go up, because then we will have a much more higher bread. So just roll it, there we go. It's such a smooth batter, right? And here I have my parchment paper along with it, so I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to just roll it around it so that we have a nice rustic bread for us. So here we are. We're going to put it in. And parchment paper is outwards so that it's easy for us to lift it out later on. So, and let this rise for about 30 to 40 minutes. Once it's risen, then we're going to put it in the oven to bake at 180 degrees for 1 hour. And then later we're going to take it out again and bake it for another 20 minutes without the pan. Right, so after baking and cooling it for almost 8 hours, this is the kind of bread we have. We can hear the sound. It has a hollowness. That means it's well baked bread. So let me just slice from the center so at least you get to see. Yes, it is dense. As you can see, it is dense, but it will be soft to eat. See how thin I've cut the slice, and there's no crumbs that falls apart. So this is a good gluten-free bread, and I like red rice because it gives a better texture and it also tastes better. And the olive makes a lot of difference because it gives more flavor to the bread. And I have my mozzarella cheese made. It is dairy-free mozzarella cheese, as you can see, and it's made from cashew nuts. So I can just add that, and a couple of tomatoes to go, and we have our sandwich. Gluten-free breads can be very difficult to make, but getting the dough done in the Thermomix is one of the most simplest and easiest way. To make a gluten-free flour mix is much more easier in the Thermomix, and I find it really more creative and adventurous in trying different types of flour. So in this case, you can use brown rice flour, plain rice flour if you want to, but I tried with red rice flour, and this is the result of my creative way of coming out with my Thermomix. My name is Sushila Patel. This is the Recipe Tales, recipes with a modern twist.